afternoon and good evening for those that they are in Europe and in Eastern. So happy Friday to everyone. Welcome everyone to this LinkedIn Live lunch and learn session focused on HR and people analytics. My name is Nicolas Pevani, as you know. I'm a people analytics leader and LinkedIn top voice. I'm very glad to host this amazing LinkedIn Live. It's a true pleasure to welcome you all to this exciting conversation, to take a break this afternoon, exceptionally for my guests in US. We have, um, a bit postponed our catch up for this 3 p.m. Paris time. And we will be 1 hour together. It's a lunch. It's the perfect moment to take a break and discuss about a fascinating topic about development plans, why development plans matter more than ever. We'll have, I'm very excited to have welcome Rebecca Taylor, co-founder of Skill Cycle. Rebecca spent over 10 years in human resource before co-founding the talent development company named Skill Cycle. The bulk of her work were focused on building systems for employees to learn and perform on their best with consistent feedback and support. She was named one of this 2024 female founders list, and Skill Cycle was coined one of the fastest growing startup in America, as well as best workplace. Welcome, Rebecca. How are you?
Thank you, Nicholas. I'm good. How are you? And thank you for being flexible to accommodate our time so that we can chat now. Thank you everybody for joining a little bit later, but how are you?
No, very good, very good. I'm so glad to welcome you to this session. I don't know if we will have George Kemish, that's the HR strategy and thought leader, will join us maybe a bit later. He has some issue in order to connect, but
Yeah.
he will discuss about that. So let's discuss, Rebecca, if you would like, just information for everyone. There is a space for learning, conversation, networking. So feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget, this discussion will be recorded. So if you have missed anything, you can catch up later on LinkedIn and also in my YouTube page. This conversation is not just about us. It's not just about Rebecca. It's about us to learn. So put your question. If you have any question, feel free, to put in the chat. So before we begin, I would like, to see where our incredible audience are joining us today. Drop your location in the comments so that we can see. We'd love to see where the global discussion reach today. Let's go to this topic, Rebecca. The world of work has changed dramatically over the past few years. We have navigated about disruption, embraced new ways of working, seen expectation evolve for employees, for leaders and organization. But through all of this change, one truth has only grown stronger. I believe it's people don't just want to work; they want to grow, and that's why today's topic is so important for a lot of employees that are, with us today and they are listening to us. We are talking about why strong development plans matters more than ever. Not just a nice to have, but as a strategic imperative for unlocking both success and balance in the workplace. That's exactly we will unpack today during this 1 hour. And I would like to share one and give your thoughts about that. It's about one topic that I have selected, one graph that I like is about individual development plan. Um, what and I like this, very simple your graph that is between passion, teams need, competence. What do you think, Rebecca, about that? And how you define, first of all, what is for you an IDP, individual development plan?
Yeah. I love this graphic too because it shows the perfect intersection of what an IDP really truly could be. It's a combination of what do you love to do, what really lights you up, what is your company, what does your team need you to do, and what are the things that you're actually truly really good at. Sometimes the things that we're good at aren't necessarily the things that the team needs, or they're not necessarily the things we're passionate about. So an ideal IDP is something that honors sort of all parts of that experience because it's part of what makes you human and it's part of what allows you to frankly make a living. The team needs parts is the part that is important to that. What makes it really, really strong is also just a connection to the skills that you need to build to keep yourself relevant in your field and in your work. And it's one of the reasons why I say that it's so important to have a really strong IDP now, because skills change so much faster now than they ever had before, or I should say needed skills change so much faster now. And so having a really concrete plan to develop those skills that won't let you get left behind as technology evolves and as companies change is really that important element of what we all really need now.
Brilliant, exactly. So I see the meantime that George, join us. Hello, George.
Hi, George.
Afternoon.
Hi, sorry I'm late. I had trouble logging in.
No worries. You have some issue with the connection. We are discussing about that. The second, and feel free, George, to jump into this discussion. But the second topic that I would like, to share is about your company's findings, Rebecca.
Mm-hmm.
And was very insightful when I shared, your findings about that. And what your researchers, reveal is about the major transformation in professional development trends and about employer shifting focus from tactical career concern to strategic interpersonal capabilities. As we see in this graph, maybe you are the best person, to describe your findings. I will not, comment. Please go ahead.
Oh yeah. Oh no, I definitely am curious. I would love for you to comment too, because I know that you're exposed to this kind of research all the time too. So, what we were really looking to see was, you see all of these stories around the rise of AI and how, employees are going to be left behind because AI is going to replace our jobs and AI is going to take over everything that we do.
Yeah.
And, whenever we hear that, I come from HR, my co-founder comes from HR. We're like, how much of this is headline and how much of this is truth? So what we really wanted to do was find truth in our own work and in our own people, or at least some sort of grounding reality that we can believe, right? And what we found was that, the narrative of employees are going to be left behind is actually not true, at least not from the companies that we work with. So when we started this company, or when we, not even so much when we started this company, but as we really started to expand the types of companies that we work with, people were focusing on things like career advancement, like time management, more of those kind of tactical elements. But it really has evolved, up till, especially in the last year, the world has changed. The real impetus has been the introduction of things like ChatGPT and generative AI.
Yeah.
But employees, when they're deciding the things that they want to learn and they're developing themselves and setting goals for their development plans, they've shifted to focusing on things that AI can't replace: strategic thinking, human connection, the ability to influence decisions, and the ability to lead people. So the narrative that employees are going to get left behind isn't really one that we buy, because employees are getting ready. Employees see this. They want to keep themselves relevant. They want to make sure that they're not going to fall behind and that they're not going to get replaced, because the things that, AI can take are the things that they're not focusing on. They're focusing on sort of those truly core human things. And, what this kind of tells us is that the narrative isn't true. The narrative isn't true that people aren't ready, or that they're not at least getting ready. But what we see is that companies aren't necessarily ready because they don't know what to do with all of these people who are building these skills. And that's kind of the shift that we're seeing right now, is companies have to rethink, not just how they develop people, but how they leverage their talent and rewrite what our jobs are now, because jobs are completely different, or they're going to be completely different for most of us moving forward. So I'll pause because I want to hear kind of your commentary on it too. But I just found that so interesting that employees are like, we're fine. You just need to catch up to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would actually totally agree with that, because looking at some of the research that's been undertaken with Gen Z and millennials, and one of the things they picked up on was the fact that about 48% of them in the research actually came back and said, well, do you know what? We don't think we're getting the development that we require for our career progression. And, the personal touch there is so important, things do get passed on, but also when they get passed on, they're put into the right framework to make sure that it actually adds value. So yeah, I totally agree with that.
Absolutely.
Spot on.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's really for me very interesting is so we know that leadership was always, a top priorities, etc. But the influence, so strategic thinking as well. But for me, the influence skills is very interesting, the rising importance of persuasion and executive presence. It was not, before like that such skills the growing priorities. So how companies can help based upon your because you were in the HR, Rebecca, what do you think about the influence piece? I'm curious to know, how do you think HR or business leaders can help employees to get the skills for influence?
Yeah. So influence is one of those skills that we see, I think that it's showing up more now because people want change. And, I know that there's a lot of, at least especially in the United States, like Gen Z, millennials, we've kind of grown up in this work environment that didn't have formal corporate training programs the way that they did before. And so we've kind of had to build a lot of our skills on our own to begin with. And so now we're kind of looking to make the world a little bit better, and we're trying to push forward a certain agenda, but we're really trying to drive change and to change systems within organizations. And so there is this need and this want for the ability to influence decisions, to bring things in. And so teaching influence is kind of one of those things that it's going to depend on the context of who you're trying to influence and why. We specifically define influence not in the influencer term. So this doesn't mean social media influencers.
Yeah.
This is the ability to kind of, understand how to drive decisions. And so a lot of teaching influence is honestly teaching emotional intelligence. That's sort of the first step, at least in our philosophy, that you kind of start with, because in order to influence well, you have to be able to read and understand people. And you can't read and understand people until you can read and understand yourself, which is where the beginning of emotional intelligence really begins. So for us, this is really, by learning emotional intelligence, you then gain the ability, the skill to influence.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. No, very insightful findings. And that's why, I shared on LinkedIn as well, and a lot of passionate discussion about that. The other topic that I would like to discuss is about, and these findings I shared sometimes ago, I can say 1 year ago, about the top strategic for talent development. What is the top strategies that organizations have implemented? And it's interesting, that was reverse monitoring was the first one, training employees of the use of AI. So monitoring is, I know that, Georgia as well, he's also a lot of, time, pointing out the mentorship in the organization, to be top of their purity. What do you think, Rebecca, about this finding that's about talent development? Because we are talking about personal development, etc. What about your position about talent development and strategies to succeed?
Yeah. So, I mean, mentoring is always a good place to start because it's really leveraging the expertise that you already have within the organization. There are pros and cons to mentoring, right? Because mentoring is always sort of something that is extra. It's always sort of on top of the job that you're already doing. So mentoring is one of those, I think it's one of those things that needs to be constantly available and not sort of a temporary mentorship program. I think it's kind of, you have a mentor there. It's sort of this ongoing relationship. And I'm a big fan and believer in having multiple mentors. So one that can maybe help you learn how to do your job today, another one that can help you navigate your job for tomorrow. When I hear reverse mentoring and when I was reading about it, sort of when these topics were really coming out, it's from how I've seen it defined is instead of traditional mentoring as a more junior employee gets mentored by a more senior employee. And reverse mentoring is just that. It's flipping that so that more senior employees are being mentored by more junior employees, which I think is a really interesting take in a good way, because it kind of gives those lower, those more junior level employees, those who are newer in their career, that voice, that ability to influence, but also the ability to really learn what it is that they need and have the space to kind of advocate for that. And I think it comes out of the narrative that we've seen that I actually do believe, which is the way that we used to learn before is not the way we're going to learn moving forward. What millennials and Gen Z want in their careers might be different from boomers and Gen X, which is always kind of in the middle. And so this is sort of, when I see reverse mentoring, it means that employees are specifically having conversations to understand what that means and how to provide those different career paths within an organization. And when it comes to talent development strategies, mentoring is always a good place to start. I'm very, very biased towards coaching, towards external professional coaching. It's a core component of what Skill Cycle does. And what I've dedicated my life's work to doing is to opening up coaching opportunities for everybody within organizations. Because having an external perspective, someone who, has no influence over your position in the organization, your salary, anything like that is a very, very important and vital resource for you to have too.
No, very, very interesting. And really for me as well, it's very interesting, to have this reverse monitoring, because someone is, Gen Z, you just tell them it's very interesting, to learn from, this new generation, as we are, senior now in these companies. But one thing that's maybe, change and is not, in red in this, in this graph, the use of AI. In this use of AI, not only for Gen Z, but also for us, about talent development, I think really, and all the research is showing that will impact us a lot regarding this development of AI. What do you think that as a coach, coaching will be impacted? All the jobs will be impacted, by 80% by 2030. What do you think that, the talent development, personal development, can AI help us, or could be a barrier for that?
Yeah. So AI can definitely help. We've been experimenting a lot with AI at Skill Cycle. And I think that the thing that's going to be really, really critical isn't just learning how to use AI. It's not just going to be, how do I ask generative AI questions about my development? Excuse me. It's going to be about how to use AI in a way that it's within the context of what your organization needs you to do. So any of us can chat GPT a development plan, right? But chat GPT is kind of like getting advice from a random robot or a random person. Having, sort of the ability to get advice on our career from something that's within a contained environment that takes in the context of what your organization needs and wants, is going to be more relevant to your actual ability to achieve the things that you want to achieve. It's that team success part of the graphic, or the team needs part of the graphic in the graphic you shared earlier. One of the things that I don't think is appreciated when it comes to training employees on the use of AI is training employees on what AI actually is. So, when coming from HR, we look at every single system and we want to see all the bells and whistles and the things that make it cool and interesting, but we always put on our skeptic hat to kind of say, okay, how can this go wrong? I always say we catastrophize so you don't have to. And there is a risk with the amount of bias that you see in AI, because AI is trained by humans and humans are biased. And so, really training employees on the ethics of AI, we don't all have to be AI developers, right? But we do have to understand what it actually is. Like, it's not a robot, ChatGPT, Claude, they're not actual people. They're code, they're machines. And what they do is they aggregate information and spit it back at you, and they want you to keep using it. They're built to keep using it. So when I say training employees on the use of AI as something that is really important, it's yes, the application is important, but it's the context that I think is really important for people to be familiar with too.
Amazing. Absolutely,
Can
absolutely.
can I just add something in there because um, I think reverse mentoring is great, and when it comes to AI, Gen Z and millennials, I mean, they grew up with these computer systems. I mean, I'm 72 years of age, and I started out as a computer operator for a large organization. But in those days, computers were punch cards and disks that were like about 12 inches across and about
Yeah,
6 inches high. I mean, um, so I think the one thing that can happen here is use the reverse mentoring to for the youngsters to actually show us oldies how to use AI,
yeah,
but maybe the older people help the youngsters actually put AI into context.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the two things there because we've got the experience of putting things into context. They've got the experience of using AI. So if you do the reverse mentoring and have both mentoring each other, then you get that joined up sort of outcome.
yeah,
Just a thought.
Yeah.
absolutely. To train them. Yes.
Yeah. And to add to that too, because I completely agree, the context and the what do I do with this is the part that the reverse mentoring really, really does help a lot with, or could help a lot with if people are using it. And I will say that one thing that I am worried about with the rise of AI is the downgrade of critical thinking. So, that's the part that I think is going to be really important for us to be able to balance so that, AI isn't thinking for us. It's just giving us tools, resources, information, but then, having the context, that mentorship to understand, how do I question this? How do I validate what it is that this is telling me? How do I apply a skeptic's eye to this in a way that I'm using critical thinking to really digest and internalize what the truth might be? And I'm not just asking AI to basically think for me. That's the thing that, I mean, there are already studies that are showing that, tools like ChatGPT are downgrading critical thinking. And it is incredibly imperative that we as people do not get lazy in our ability to think critically. And reverse mentoring is definitely a way to kind of build those skills and hone those muscles so that we're not just
Yeah.
slaves to AI.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. The fact that we rely too much on AI, we for everything I see, the everyone is looking at their Copilot or ChatGPT for everything, everything.
Hmm.
They even don't think first. We need to put some steps first. Think about the answer, then go to ChatGPT maybe to have other ideas. But the automatic way to look at the ChatGPT for everything, it's, as you said brilliantly, Rebecca, is the critical thinking. And I see in the comments as well, we are in favor of what we are discussing. uh, Mr. Mesrouche is saying reverse mentoring is the best way to change the trend where only seniors can mentor the juniors. And I see and learn from Gen Z to be relevant. Different generation together can make a diverse team with diverse ideas and perspective. And we have another comment from MBBN. He say mentoring is strategic, but time has changed as more and mentors monetize their service, which notably, but those cannot afford due to reason beyond one's control, still lagging behind. I hope they could be a pro bono. And finally, we have another one. HR has two dimensions for AI. Process can be AI based, but the personality dimension are different. Is it to be seen how AI can help? I would like to share another slide and another findings, the same that before, but about the important outcome of employee development program and the positive impact, I can say, in employee engagement, employee productivity, and employee retention. This impact outcome is, proved by research that is pros. Do you find also the same findings, Rebecca, in your companies about the outcome of employee development program on your clients or any other part?
Oh, for sure. And, employee engagement is one of those metrics that can be tough to measure,
Yeah.
because it's usually a component of multiple kind of touch points. It's not just one engagement survey that you might do once a year and see what people say because everybody tells the truth in surveys, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's more of an observation of behaviors and really seeing how people experience the culture.
Mhm.
But the reason an IDP does a really good job of driving engagement and productivity is because it gives people clarity. In a time when things are changing really rapidly, the political cycle everywhere is a little bit uncertain, and people are experiencing anxiety in their day to day just because of the amount of uncertainty that's there. An IDP isn't going to solve everything, right? But what it does is it does give them some grounded sense of clarity, of understanding, okay, here's my role in this organization, here's my potential in this organization, and here's a way that I can get to unlock this potential to gain more things. So when I have that sense of clarity, I'm less distracted by all of the unknowns, and I'm able to apply myself to my job, which makes me perform my job better. So that's where my productivity can go up.
Yeah.
So the reason that they're so important and cannot be understated is that it just gives someone like a grounding element of their job and frankly of their life that we might not have everywhere else. And that it's not just about people mentally clocking in more to work because they have this IDP. It's what the IDP actually contains that makes them more engaged and more there, because it can give a sense of purpose.
Wonderful. Absolutely. Absolutely. George, you would like to comment about this outcome of employee development?
Yeah, well, as you know, I don't like the word productivity too much. Productivity on its own really doesn't create value. If you want
Yeah.
productivity, then you've got to have human performance, which is something a little bit different, but it includes productivity as an outcome.
Yeah.
A lot of the areas we need to look at there are things like the learning culture within the organization and how people are developed. The work that people are given to do, is it meaningful? The way in which they get feedback is very important as well. If you're looking at telling people how they've done, it's so easy to look at somebody else that's in the team and make a comparison, but you can't do that because everybody's at a different learning stage in their career.
Yeah.
And you've got to treat people as individuals. And this all comes down to what brings about performance, and that performance then ends up as productivity. So you've got to have the two things together. You can't have one on its own. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
I
No.
think I love that you said that, because it's so true. It's like performance is the thing that's in the middle that leads to productivity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. One question that I have to both of you is about employee retention, because we think that in a lot of times people are leaving because they don't get, the development that they need. So in a lot of research we see that, and now one of the outcome of the employee development is, as you see, it will impact the retention. So more we will give them, and is it automatic? What we are seeing that okay, more you will give someone the development that they need, more they will stay in the companies. Is it a correlation between the development that we give employer are giving to employees? Is it a clear correlation between retention and development plan, or we need to give something that employees needs for their own development, personalized development is correlated? Or how you see that? How do you see this retention? And I know that's a difficult question.
I was going to say it's one that's going to have so many nuances to the claim. When I'm looking at correlation between development and retention, I have to triangulate that with exit interview data. So I need to understand, why are people leaving my company? If people are leaving my company because the company's not making any money and they're worried that they're going to get fired, then no development plan that I give them is going to alleviate that fear. Or if it is, it has to be a really, really strong one. There's so many different, there's so much different context around it.
Yeah.
But from a very top line perspective, yes, there is a correlation between retention and a development plan. And again, it's because it does give people that sense of purpose, that sense of clarity, and it shows them that there is a future there. So, in my experience in HR, I've spent time at public companies, I've spent time at startups. And there's always that common thread that I think everybody's read all these, sort of areas where the primary reason people don't leave companies, they leave managers.
Yeah.
So if your manager is being developed and they're building their own skills as a manager, then you as the employee are going to be able to reap the benefits of that theoretically, right? Especially then with your own development plan that helps you to build your skills in conjunction. So it's that, a high tide rises all ships. If everyone is in this sort of this growth mode, this development sort of mentality, then yes, that absolutely increases employee retention. That being said, there is also a reality that not everybody is going to be able to grow into every single career, right? There is sort of a point where if you want to grow and I don't mean grow of skills, I mean rise in position, rise in salary, you may hit your ceiling at a company and no development plan is going to save you unless there is that higher level position. But that's what we would call favorable turnover or favorable attrition, because if someone grows out of the company, they've gotten everything that they need out of that, and they're leaving on really good terms. They then become the greatest representation of your organization because they say, I've grown here, I did this, I had to leave for these reasons, but I would always recommend that as a place for people to grow. So it goes beyond retention in my mind. It really goes to your brand and the quality of your talent and what people say about you when they leave your company.
Absolutely.
I could talk about this for a long time. I don't want to hog the whole mic. Sorry, George.
No, it's very interesting.
Oh, I'm loving it. You can go on talking forever for me because I'm taking a lot from this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really good.
No, very, very interesting part. No, now we are coming. So thank you for this. We finalize, the answer for this question about development parts, about productivity, etc. So I would like, to look at some HR news spotlight for this week highlight. The first one that I shared myself as well, I found fascinating findings about the endless workday for employees. Is about, we are during the day, employees are from early morning until end of the day, we are focused, flued by message, meetings, interruptions. What they found about Microsoft is about 117 emails flooding their inbox daily, 153 Teams message pinging throughout the day. And of course, meetings, 57% of meetings sprung up spontaneously without any calendar, without any invitation, and just 2 minutes between interruption by meeting. And do you think that, today, all of us, we have, the Teams, we are working on Teams, we are working on the digital tools, etc. And we are coming back, what you said, Rebecca, about, the fact of strategic thinking, etc. Are we less nowadays concentrate on what we are doing? Are we less productive because of this action that prevent us to think, or we are still productive?
I think our performance is suffering. I think that, it has a lot to do with sort of the flow of work, which was a term that was coined, a while ago. so when you enter the other one is sort of the zone of genius. When you enter your zone of genius and you're really in a flow, it means that you're doing your best type of work, right? If you're in sales, you're locked in, you're pitching, you're there. If you're in marketing, maybe, or a designer, maybe you're making really, really great graphics and ads and your creativity is flowing.
Yeah.
You can't get to that zone if you're constantly replying to emails and constantly getting pinged. And, I think it's even the endless workday. It goes even beyond just being interrupted throughout the day. It has to do with getting emails outside of whatever work hours might be. And, this really started when we put work email on our phones. And as soon as we were available outside of when we were at the office, it opened up a lot of opportunities for remote work and flexible work. But then in that, it opened it up where now we're just available, we're theoretically available all the time, and it doesn't matter whether you're at work or not. So I think this is sort of I think it's foolish for us to think that this is not going to continue. It's foolish for us to think that that this is going to go away anytime soon.
Yeah.
What we have to do is build the skills to be better at handling it. We are so attached to our phones and to notifications, and we feel this need to just respond. We see a notification, we're like, let me respond.
Yeah.
And, we have to recondition ourselves against that. And what we do with our team at Skill Cycle is we're all remote and we all work in different time zones. So we do have a much longer theoretical workday, because if I have a teammate who's 3 hours behind me who needs me outside my work hours, I can't ignore her, right? But it's really important to almost prioritize the forms of communication that you're using and say, what are the ones that I have to respond to more urgently? So for me, it's a phone call from my CEO. My CEO calls me. That's usually something that's like, okay, she needs me right now. If it's a text, then it's just when you get to this. If it's a Slack, it's when you get to this. If it's an email, it could be within 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
But we have to set boundaries and standards and expectations around how we respond to these things. And we have to set time in our calendars to just not respond to something, so that we can just actually get into our flow of work and actually put our brains in this position where we're not just reacting to our environment all the time. So we have to do more thinking and less doing, and that'll actually help us perform better.
Now, very interesting topic that you bring, that about flexibility, about remote work, and also the fact that we are always connected to our, to our emails, meetings, etc. And the one of these findings is about people are, answering emails even in the weekend, work emails. They are looking at until 10 p.m., more than 10 p.m. I think it's 20% of people, of employees, they are doing that. Is it, as you said so rightly, is the boundaries between work and, personal activities? Because if you are in the personal activities looking at your email, and sometimes some people are saying, okay, but I'm looking at the email, I'm answering an email, is not a work, but is the work, right? Or, answering an email about work, we are working, right?
Yeah.
So and that's so important. And I think this since the pandemic, the way that we are connected every time, we don't have any time in order to be because when you are in the office, you have your time strictly committed. So but when you are working remotely, it's different. I have, and what do you think, George, about these boundaries of work and this workday chaos? Are you agree with what we just said?
Well, it's such a wide scope to look at, because, you sort of look at what might be causing it. We've talked about emails, we've talked about telephone calls, we've talked about meetings. You can also look at AI as well, because AI is going to produce so much more data now.
Yeah.
And I think perhaps we're going to get to a point whereby organizations are going to have information managers that actually look at the data that's coming through and can actually siphon off the non-important data that doesn't need actioning, and actually ensure that the right data is getting to the right people when it does need actioning. And I think that would be a help. As far as meetings are concerned, well, they need to be managed a lot better. And that really comes down to whoever's calling that meeting. And you've got to ensure that if you're calling a meeting, make sure that, you know, what you're talking about is relevant to everybody at that meeting. And not, you know, if it's something that could be taken offline in an email, telephone call, or even a face-to-face meeting for maybe 5-10 minutes, take it offline, get rid of it. It doesn't need to be in that meeting. You can cut down on the agenda for meetings by doing that. So there's a lot of things there that can be looked at. You know, I know when I was working for the Ministry of Defence here in the UK, and I used to manage my time by ensuring that I only looked at my emails on the hour. So if I went in at 9 o'clock, or 8 o'clock, I'd look at my emails when I went in, but I wouldn't look at them again until an hour later. And it was accepted. If you wanted me in a hurry, give me a ring and tell me you've got a problem, we'll get it sorted out. But don't keep bombarding me with emails because, I've got other work to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I always say too, if most of us rarely experience an actual emergency at work. We're not, unless you're a brain surgeon, a doctor, you're in sort of those fields, but most of us don't really have true work emergencies. So, there's also that level of perspective. I think that, it's good to have a sense of urgency if you're trying to solve a problem. But, it doesn't mean that everything is, emergent and urgent, and being able to kind of regulate that for ourselves it helps us interact better for each other. But just a sense of perspective. So, sometimes like I'll have sort of this thought process where I'm just like, if you need a pint of blood, call me. Like if you need something like that, call me immediately. Otherwise, I think another part that also helps, at least us at Skill Cycle, is we all have pretty open calendars in the sense that we can all see what we're all doing. Yeah. So before I message my coworker, if I have a question, I look to see, is he on a customer call right now? And if he is, I'm not going to bother him. I want him to focus. So there's also just sometimes that just 2 seconds to just think and just be courteous of the person who you're specifically either messaging or texting just goes a long way. And, we'll have blocks on our calendars that'll say like, this is my ask me anything block. This is my block that's like, I leave this open for random ad hoc things. And if you need something outside of that time, obviously message me, call me, but that's likely when I'm going to get to it. It's just that half second of courtesy that really goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. No, very inspiring. And I'm sure that a lot of people listening to you will also follow this rule to respect the agenda of others. Yeah, absolutely. And we don't have any urgency in our level what we are doing. The second HR news, and thank you, Rebecca and George, about your inspiring answer. The second HR news that I selected is about. In the journal, I see that the biggest company across America are cutting their workforce. Is there a growing belief that we'll have too many employees, too many companies, we are going to go to the cutting cost trend? Do you see that? Is it, reality because of political, decision, or just a trend?
I think it's partly political decisions, but it is also, I think, one of those things that it is ultimately a trend. We've been trying to do more with less since, I don't know, for almost at least 20 years now, from what all the research that I've seen, that's become sort of this term that was coined in, I think, 2008 or so. Yeah. And, that is sort of a lot of pressure that companies are facing now to continue to do more with less. And everyone thinks that AI can basically replace, people. What I think is happening now is that eventually companies are going to see that they've cut too deep. And that now, they've gotten rid of people who can actually question whether or not the company's going in the right direction, people who can bring innovation, things that when you hire someone and when you run a business, there's the doing stuff component, there's that, but then there's the thinking component too. And by cutting your workforce too close, you're taking away those thinkers, those people who can really contribute to the growth of the organization, and who can manage each other and, be the humans that the company needs. The other side of it too is that if people don't have jobs, people aren't going to buy things. And if people aren't buying things, then the economy is not going to do well either. So I think eventually there's going to be a point where it's like, okay, there's too many jobs that we've cut. And whether we like it or not, we do have to employ people. And I'm saying that sarcastically. Like, I do vehemently believe in employing people and giving people a sense of purpose and independence in their career too. Yeah, we're seeing it. I just think that it's going to reverse itself. It's almost like it's a reaction to everyone being afraid of how they overhired during COVID. And then all the layoffs started in 2022, 2023. So this is almost like a reverse of that, where they're not hiring as long as they possibly can. But as a result, employees are burning out. People are taking on way too many jobs. They're expected to work way more than a human, is supposed to, hence the endless workday. So, I do think that it will eventually start to go the other way again.
No, very, very true. Very true. Exactly. Since the pandemic, this hiring, fast hiring, trend has pushed, a lot of, startup, to start lay off people. George, any comments about this news?
In the UK, we're finding it a little bit different because thanks to the government policies that have been brought in, there's been an increase in employers' national insurance. There's also been quite a hike in the minimum wage, but they're also pushing through new employment legislation, which goes into something like 310 pages of legislation, 150 different laws coming in, and a lot of this is going to cost organizations money. Well, it already is. I mean, the national insurance is, and the hike in salary is, but it's mainly the smaller companies that are unable to actually fill that hike, if you like. So you've got things like restaurants and hotels and the smaller sort of entrepreneurial type businesses that are actually losing out because they've either got to get rid of staff or they're unable to recruit staff when it's required because they just can't afford it. And that's come down to government policy. That's not come down to anything else. So I think the larger companies in the UK can probably field some of these changes a little better, but the smaller organizations certainly can't, and they're feeling it.
Thank you, George. So we see that, this news was for US, but as you pointed out in UK as well, there is another different situation as well. George, another, is George take moment about the topic of today, about what we heard about Rebecca, about development plans, talent development, about strong development. What do you think about this discussion that we have and inspiring insight from Rebecca?
Well, I actually agree with everything that's been said this morning, because when you look at it, it all makes sense. And what I like about LinkedIn, and what I especially like about being able to sort of see people face to face and listen to them, is the fact they always present you with something that you can then take away and put into your own thought process. It's a great way of learning because, we all learn from other people, we don't learn from ourselves. So, it's been absolutely fantastic to listen to this morning. And I agree with so much of it. There is a lot there that needs to be taken in. AI particularly is going to make changes. Will people lose their jobs? I think it's more likely that jobs will change than people will lose jobs. It's going to change the way in which people work. I'm coming to the end of my working life now, but for the youngsters coming up through, they are going to have to be able to. They need the agility to be able to actually adapt to those changes with speed and scale. Because if you don't adapt with speed and scale, then you end up missing out. Because as we all know, in industry and commerce, things are changing all the time. They're never the same. And it's very important that people are able to react to that change with the speed and scale required to actually add value to all stakeholders. So, there's a lot there that we need to take in, a lot of change that I'm seeing, and I'm thinking, wow, moving from the days when I worked on computers to what we have now, and and how people use it, and the AI that we use. I moved from computers, by the way, and ended up working for Roots Group and then Chrysler, and we actually built cars and commercial vehicles. And when I now look at the way in which AI is used in those commercial processes, those production processes, it is so different. I mean, I walk in somewhere, and in my day, I would set a machine for somebody else to use. I would be the skilled person setting the machine, and a semi-skilled person would actually operate the machine. Now you've got one person that sets the machine and watches it to make sure it's doing what it should do. So yes, it can cut out jobs, but there again, those jobs can be moved elsewhere. Because at the end of the day, when you finish it, putting a car together, for instance, somebody's got to check and make sure that everything's in the right place. There's no blemishes in the paintwork. Even though we've got robots to do the work, you can't always guarantee the quality. So there has to be quality assurance. So people have moved from working on the line to actually taking up those quality assurance jobs. And you've also, when you look at the actual robots themselves, somebody's got to program them and somebody's got to maintain them. So you've got jobs moving that way as well. So, it's not always a case of we've lost a job. It's often a case of that job has moved to facilitate what we're now using in AI. So, it's great. I love it. I love this world. I love the way things are changing, and
thank you. Thank you, George. What do you think, Rebecca, about, what George is saying?
I'm nodding very, very much. So, especially, so it's so funny because, you talk about having the machines to assemble the cars, but a human still has to inspect it before it goes out into the world, because ultimately there's a human who's responsible for whether or not that machine works. Right. And if something goes wrong with that machine, with the car, no one's going to sue the machine that built it. They're going to sue the person or the company that said this is right, this is good. It's safe to go out and use. And we're in that space with AI. That's the mentality that we have to have with AI. AI might be able to get us 80% of the way there with a grand body of work that we might be doing, right? But we have to be, as humans, to make sure that we're applying the context to say, does this accomplish what we set out to accomplish? Well, can we endorse this? Because ultimately, this is our work, and AI helped us get there, but we're the ones that have to check it, make sure that it does, that it's not doing harm, that it's being effective. And that's sort of the thing that when we talk about teaching people AI, that's the piece that I think is more important than learning how to write a good ChatGPT prompt. It's how to take what it tells you and apply the right level of skepticism, because otherwise we're just believing whatever we see on the internet. And when I was growing up, that was always the first thing that we learned was don't believe everything you see on the internet. And believing everything that you hear, that you read in ChatGPT or Claude, all it's doing is scraping the internet. So being able to look at it, do that quality control, that critical thinking, that context, that is where the work needs to be. So thank you, George. I love that.
Yeah. Thank you, George. I'm looking at the comments in the chat. There is a lot of people that they are, I agree with your inspiring, conversation. I have a question. There is a divide between the employees and the management. How it can be addressed? Anything other than engagement? Do you want to answer that, Rebecca?
Yeah. So, I mean, it has to be you have to get to the root of where the divide's coming from. Is it that the employee, and I'm taking this sort of broadly, group of employees, group of management. So employees are not bought into the work that managers are giving them or the mission that managers are talking about. If that is the case, then, there has to be a lot of work that goes into figuring out the root of what's going on so that you can execute the right plan to fix it. Engagement is almost a result of fixing that divide. So, I am very, very biased towards a change management process and just putting a change management lens on basically any problem that a company kind of comes across. So if we're seeing that there is sort of tension or divide between employees and management, the first thing that does is that kicks off our awareness, that we're aware that there's a problem. So now we have to, if we think the problem's big enough, that gives us the desire to go do something about that, to investigate and see what's going on. And then you start to gain the knowledge of what's happening, which gives you the ability to fix it, and then reinforcement to then actually see that that's a more long-term solution. So the ADKAR model of change management is the way that I would go about figuring out what that divide is and how to fix it, with the ultimate result being ideally an increase in engagement.
Very good, very good, very good. I hope that you and Masroor show you, Rebecca, answer perfectly your question. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for that. We wrap up, this insightful, LinkedIn Live with Rebecca. Your thoughts, ideas was make this discussion very impactful. I would like, to thank everyone joining this LinkedIn Live. I would like, to give, the last takeaway to Rebecca about your takeaway from this discussion between us. So we understand that a development plan is not a nice to have. It's a business perspective. It's a mandatory for everyone to have it. Talent development is very inspiring. We have discussed about reverse engineering, about the outcome of this talent development. Very inspiring. What is your advice to companies? What your companies are doing about this area as well? I would like, looking forward to see your future findings as well. What is you will concentrate on the future? What do you think of that?
Yeah, and I love the question, and thank you everybody for being here, and thank you, Nicholas, for having me, and George, it was so good to meet you and chat with you. The main advice that I would say is don't underestimate your employees. Don't underestimate your people. That is the biggest thing that we found in our research, is that the narrative around employees is severely underestimating people's want and ability to contribute. And the way that you will immediately fail is if you underestimate your people. And that's really where their development plan comes in handy. But if you're already writing people off because you might have opinions about them, you might have biases about them, then you're underestimating them and you're doing yourself and them a disservice. So just, I believe in the potential that everybody has. Maybe I'm an optimist, maybe I'm naive, I don't know, but I really do. I don't believe that anybody wakes up every day and says, today I'm going to fail. Today I'm just going to tank everything. And so assume that people just want to do the right thing, or they want to do well, and never underestimate them.
Wonderful takeaway. Looking forward to see your future findings of Skills Cycle, Rebecca. Of course, I will share with a lot of people here. George, your last takeaway for this conversation.
Rebecca, it's been great to meet you.
Likewise.
It's been really you know, I've loved listening to you. I've loved the input and the, you know, your enthusiasm, and I totally agree with everything that you've said.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more to it. We could go a lot deeper, but in an hour, you don't. I know you don't get that chance. It's, you know, trying to put across what you've learned in the light in your lifetime in an hour is always difficult. And you know, but I do really appreciate it because there's thought, you know, things there that I can take away in my thought processes,
Yeah.
and I'm hoping that other people watching this will also take away things that you've said and sort of build them into their thought processes as well. And you know, it's been great. Thank you so much. And
Thanks.
Nicholas, as
Likewise.
ever, thank
Thank
you
you.
for inviting me again.
Thank you so much, George. Thank you. Huge thank you, Rebecca. We just finished,
Thank you.
our LinkedIn Live. See you every Friday at 12:30 p.m. CST time for fresh ideas. Thank you so much. Have a great day, Rebecca, and a great weekend
You
as
too.
well. All. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.